The story begins with Alexei, a simple city dweller, inheriting an old house on the outskirts of a village, surrounded by dense, almost impenetrable forests. The house was built many decades ago by his grandfather, whom he barely knew. The only thing he remembered was being taken there once or twice as a child. But over the years, the family stopped mentioning the house, as if they had forgotten it forever. After much thought, Alexei decides to go there for a few days to assess the condition of the house. The journey was long and passed through narrow village roads surrounded by dense forests. Finally, having reached the old and dilapidated house, Alexei felt a strange tension. It seemed as if something was pressing on him, but he attributed it to old superstitions and fatigue after a long journey. The house looked old, but solid, as if it contained something ancient. Inside, everything was covered in dust, and in the corner of the living room there was a cabinet that, strangely enough, looked new. Alexei noticed that it was locked with a massive lock, the key to which was nowhere to be found. On the very first night, Alexei heard the door creak in the hall. He got out of bed and walked around the house, but found no one. He thought it was just the wind or old boards, but the feeling of anxiety did not leave him. Strange sounds continued to bother him all night, and it was as if someone invisible was looking in the windows. The next day, Alexei went to the village and met a local resident, old man Vasily. Hearing that Alexei had settled in his grandfather's house, the old man warned him. This forest is not simple. There are rumors about it that it keeps old souls inside who protect it from strangers. Be careful. Returning home, Alexei decided to open the closet. He felt that this closet was hiding some important secret, but he could not even say why. Suddenly, he remembered his grandfather, whispering something strange and disturbing to him about the powers of the forest. But his childhood memories were hazy, and Alexei wrote them off to his imagination. When he studied the walls and furniture in the house, he discovered ancient symbols under a layer of dust. They were scratched into the walls and ceiling and looked like ritual signs. Alexei did not know what these symbols meant, but each of them was associated with the forest. Trees, eyes, symbols of the eternal circle, and eyes watching from the darkness. On the second night, Alexei again heard footsteps outside the window, but this time the sounds were louder, as if someone was walking along the hallway and scratching at the door of his room. He jumped out of bed and swung the door open, but found no one there. The next morning he found the closet ajar. Inside, on the shelf, lay a leather-bound book covered in dust. Opening it, Alexei found his grandfather's diary, which recorded strange events that took place in this house. In the diary, the grandfather described how a certain entity lives in the forest, an ancient creature that his great-grandfather once imprisoned. Creatures from the darkness can control consciousness if a person is left alone. They hide in the forest, live in the shadows, and can penetrate the houses of those who disturb them. The next day, Alexei went into the forest, hoping to dispel his fears. He found an old abandoned chapel in the thicket. Its walls were covered with the same symbols that he saw in the house. When he came closer, it seemed to him that hundreds of invisible eyes were looking at him. Alexei felt cold sweat running down his back, but he could not resist going inside. There he found altars and old candles, almost completely burnt out. And suddenly he heard whispers coming from all sides. It seemed as if these were the voices of his ancestors warning him of danger. He ran away, realizing that the forest held some sinister powers. Returning to the house, Alexei felt that he was no longer himself. His thoughts were strange and inconsistent, and voices were playing in his head. It seemed to him that someone was quietly whispering in his ear, urging him to stay and study the gift his grandfather had left him. The words from his grandfather's diary kept ringing in his head. The forest demands a sacrifice. That night he heard footsteps again. This time they were clearer, closer, and more insistent. Opening the door, he saw a shadow, a vague but terrifying silhouette. The creature was standing at the end of the hallway and was slowly approaching him. Alexei rushed to the bedroom and locked the door, but the shadow did not leave him. It knocked on the door, as if trying to break through to him. But suddenly, everything went quiet. Studying the diary, Alexei learned that his great-grandfather had made a pact in the forest. The spirits of the forest demanded sacrifices, and every inhabitant of this house had to leave offerings in the old chapel. Otherwise, the entity would break free and take the souls of those who disturbed the peace of the forest. The next morning, he went to the old altar in the chapel to try to perform the ritual described in the diary. He brought old family heirlooms left by his grandfather and cast the spells he saw in the book. But something went wrong. Suddenly, a hum began in the chapel, and the altar began to crack. Alexei felt how the air filled with cold, and the shadows around him thickened and took on terrifying shapes. Having barely escaped from the chapel, Alexei ran home. But looking back, he saw that the forest seemed to come to life. The trees began to move, their branches stretched out to him like hands. Suddenly, he heard a voice. "You have broken the pact." It seemed to him that every step back brought him closer to his own end. When he returned to the house, on the floor by the threshold, he saw an old photograph of his great-grandfather, who was looking at him with empty eyes. He suddenly realized that he had become part of this curse, and since then, neither the village nor the forest have seen him again. Since then, rumors have been circulating in the village that his silhouette is sometimes seen in the forest, wandering among the trees. They say that he has become a part of the forest forever, and now seeks victims for the cursed altar in the depths of the forest.